All right, welcome to the SIG Cloud Provider Deep Dive. We are the last time slot at KubeCon North America 2025, which is a real year that definitely exists. We, we are super excited to hear your thoughts and to give you some insights into what we're thinking, where we're going. And I think we'll just kick it off with introducing our panelists and jumping right in. Let's start with you, Walter.
Hi, so I'm Walter Fender. I also go by Chef Taco on GitHub. I work for Google and I do a variety of things, but SIG Cloud Provider is definitely one of the larger ones, including maintaining things like the API Server Network Proxy, occasionally helping out on Crow, and doing things in the Cloud Controller Manager, and very occasionally in Cloud Provider GCP.
I'm Michael McCune, known in GitHub as Elmico or Elmico, depending on how you choose to pronounce it. I do some cloud provider maintenance at Red Hat. I also do a lot of cluster autoscaler maintenance and Carpenter maintenance, especially related to the cluster API project. And I'm hoping to do more cloud provider in the future, but splitting your time is sometimes difficult.
Hi all, I'm Joel Speed. I also work at Red Hat on OpenShift. I'm a SIG Cloud tech lead. I've spent the last 5 years finding gnarly issues in the different cloud providers and raising bugs against them all. If I'm not doing cloud stuff, then I'm doing CAPI or having very strong opinions about APIs.
And I'm Jesse Butler. I'm a principal PM in Amazon EKS. Work at AWS. I was in various other open source products and projects along the last 15 years or so. Most recently in Crow with some of these fine folks here, and also they're really excited about what we're doing in SIG Cloud Provider with it. So I'm really excited to talk about it. Thanks everybody for sticking around to the last slot of the conference.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. So,
Wait,
like I said,
aren't you going to introduce yourself?
Oh, no, I'm going to introduce myself.
Okay,
It's fine.
Okay.
It's all good. Like I said, I'm Bridget Kromhout, and I work at Microsoft Azure in upstream open source. I am also a SIG Cloud Provider co-chair. I have also been active in cluster API and other areas in the Kubernetes ecosystem. I think I'm really excited about Crow and about our other endeavors to improve our testing, et cetera, because do you ever feel like you come in halfway through a story and you wanted to maybe understand what came before, but you also want to make something happen? And I came in near the end of the let's figure out how to get out of tree. And so now it's kind of exciting being a little bit earlier in some of these new endeavors. So with that, let's just jump right in with what we're excited about right now. Where's SIG Cloud Provider going? There's so much going on with cross-platform building blocks. I would just love to hear, I'll toss it to Elmico and say, what are we thinking about these cross-platform building blocks?
So we've been doing a lot of work over the years to remove cloud provider specific code from the core of Kubernetes, right? And not just for the cloud controllers, but also things like CSI and networking and whatnot. And I think that part of that movement pushes us in a direction where now we have to look at Kubernetes from a more agnostic position in terms of the cloud provider that it runs on. And so one of the things that I'm really excited about is the possibility that we could create building blocks that will give cloud providers more tools for interfacing with Kubernetes and interfacing with Kubernetes in a way where they can confirm how well their software is working or how resilient their software is working. You could think about in the case of cloud controllers, is there a way that we can build universal testing for these things? And in my mind, that would be a great kind of building block that we could then share with the community so that more cloud providers could participate in the activity of Kubernetes conformance and whatnot. And that to me is really exciting.
All right, so when you're talking about that and you're talking about building blocks, I immediately am thinking about these cross-provider places where I know you in Red Hat obviously are dealing with many of your customers use multiple clouds, public, private clouds, et cetera. And a lot of the conversations that we started having when our group started getting together and talking about the consistency that people want in their experiences, I think that Jesse put it a really good way when he said, well, we could all go our own way and come back together and start trying to bring our efforts together in 18 months, or we could just skip that part and start collaborating now in the open. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think I've seen enough projects that do exactly that, right? Like there's a problem, you try to go solve the problem, maybe some of it's open source, maybe it's not. And people all over the world start doing 6 different things, and 2 of them are really good. So the other ones sort of join forces, and then you have 2 that maybe compete or friendly competition, and then you end up pulling it together. And I think I've known some of the people here for a while, and reached out particularly to Bridget, I think early, and said, hey, we have this idea on how to abstract cloud native building blocks, just in the cluster, a simple primitive. We're really excited about it. Would you like to cooperate, right? And it turned into collaboration pretty much right off the bat. Also with Walter and Justin from Google, we reached out and we said, hey, we think you'd be interested in this too. Turned out that they were working on something already. So yeah, we pulled all of those streams together, and that's what became Kube Resource Orchestrator, or CRO. And we thought immediately, we didn't want it to be a sandbox project. It didn't need to have a t-shirt with a cool logo, though we do have a cool logo. But we didn't want it to be yet another thing. We just wanted it to be a feature that everybody could build with. And so that's right from the beginning. We thought, well, SIG Cloud Provider would be a cool place for that, because we knew you sort of like, you mission accomplished on getting things out of KK. What's the next step? You need these building blocks. So that's what we're really excited about.
Well, and when you say that, that reminds me that when we were discussing this, Joel, you started talking about your concept of SIG Cloud Provider as being a rally point. You want to go into more detail about what you see us accomplishing there?
Yeah, so I work with lots of different clouds, right? Red Hat, we don't have our own cloud, but we run on Google and Amazon and Microsoft and many more, which means that we see problems everywhere, right? And we bring this together in the SIG Cloud meetings where it's like, hey guys, I found this bug on Amazon. And it turns out actually it's on Azure and it's on Microsoft and all of these other platforms, because while everyone thinks all the platforms are different, at the end of the day, like Crow is trying to achieve, they're not, and we have the same bugs everywhere. So we kind of bring that group together in that community to kind of have those discussions and just give them heads up, like, hey, IBM folks, you might want to check this out because we found this bug in 3 other places.
Yeah. And I think that this is something that I've definitely noticed. And I'll say that, Joel, I think we gave you even before you were a tech lead, I think we gave you a SIG Cloud Provider award for just the sheer amount of bugs, the gnarly bugs, like you said, that you found and fixed. And I think that's a great example of community members getting involved. And it turns out your reward, if you find and fix a whole bunch of bugs, is you might get even more responsibilities. Wait, this is a selling point, right? You might get to be on a stage. It'll be great. Okay, so
Can I
yes,
just circle
please
back
do.
to something that Jesse was talking about a minute ago? Because
Absolutely.
you were talking about, Crow joining SIG Cloud Provider and kind of, a little bit about that journey. And I think it was interesting for me when this came up, and, obviously talking with Bridget and talking with Walter about, the project. And it caused us to have a little bit of a self-reflection moment within the SIG, where we said, traditionally, this SIG had come together for the purpose of pulling, the cloud provider specific code out of the core of Kubernetes, and we had really rallied around that for many years. And when Jesse came and bringing Crow, and we had just recently added the API server network proxy as well, we started to say, look, should we go back and rewrite our charter a little bit to speak about this future that we're moving into, where we kind of accomplished this big task, and it took us 7 or 8 years to really finish it, and there's still work to be done on that in terms of the testing and kind of the extended life cycle. But I think this work is going to be really important to say, maybe in the future, or I think hopefully in the future, SIG Cloud Provider becomes this venue for helping to coordinate and collaborate on these type of projects. Where, like you said, instead of all going and building different stuff, let's come together and build together from the beginning.
And I want to point out, like, at least from my perspective, there's actually a uniformity of pattern here. So when you look at Cloud Controller Manager or Kubelet Auth Provider, we have an interface, which we try to say is the same interface for every Kubernetes user, and then there's an implementation that is cloud provider specific. And one of the things that Crow now allows you to do is say, I have other things that are cloud provider specific. Maybe it's ACK, ASO, and KCC. Maybe it's something else. But they each have their own APIs. And one of the things that Crow then allows you to do is say, I now can generate the common interface on top of, in this case, ACK, ASO, and KCC, so that my users, especially for someone like Red Hat, can say, I've got the same usage everywhere, but the right thing happens on each cloud provider. And that's what we're, as a SIG, good at. And I think it's just taking what we already know to be a working pattern and doing it again.
I think the flip side of that is like doing this work to abstract for that customer, which is of course, somebody who's doing work to make sure that this works uniformly, simplifying it, building tooling around making it uniform, is the entire community can benefit from that simple primitive as well. I think the other part that I'm excited about the project landing in SIG Cloud Provider and the new expanded charter is that not only does this help SIG Cloud Provider express cloud primitives through Kubernetes, it also helps the community normalize and standardize those. So you can have something like, an object store bucket. And under the covers, your implementation could do many different things, but your tooling can be consistent. You know what you're getting. It's a bucket, right?
Well, and to your point, I was just talking with someone who was in a private cloud environment, and they were wondering, is Crow going to help me? And I think the answer is, yeah, if you decide to make it help you, because it's open source. So, but at least you'll be able to see what the other providers are doing and make your choices accordingly.
Well, and I think that that's a great point, Bridget. I think one of the things I would say is it's a KRM. I mean, not trying to oversimplify the huge amount of work that's involved in making something look very simple. But that simple look is it converts from simple KRM to complicated KRM, right? What that complicated KRM does, Crow doesn't care about. Similarly, Cloud Controller Manager, you write the controllers. The complicated part for any cloud provider is not the CCM, it's the controllers that run on the CCM. The CCM is just a way of running your controllers, right? So I think it is that consistent pattern, and you should be able to write a Crow to any KRM you want and then back it with whatever actual controller is needed to work on your, bare metal or on-prem system.
Yeah. And I should say, I see that you want to add something there, Almiko. So I'll just say there is, as Walter alluded to, a lot of complexity there. And there's a pay no attention to the messy tech debt that maybe Joel can give us a little more detail about. But first, Almiko.
Well, I love what you're talking about with the conversations you're having with users and maintainers and operators who come forward and say, I've got my own platform and I'm not sure how does this fit in. And for me, that circles back to the message we started with about these building blocks, right? If the SIG can be involved in producing and helping coordinate more of these building blocks, then there's kind of these silent operators that we don't always hear from, right? And they're the ones who are like, I'm building a cloud environment inside my organization, and how would I build a cloud controller for it? Or how would I automate certain types of infrastructure in a way that the observability and monitoring looks similar to other things, right? And so that, yeah. Joel, please.
So I was going to come back to the point that we've heard several times around the SIG was started to remove code from Kube, right? Which was a great thing to do, right? But it means that we've taken all of this code that we wrote 10 years ago, which, believe it or not, was not perfect. We've extracted it, and it's still not perfect. And we've learned a lot over the last 10 years about things that we did wrong at first. And because we're Kube, we've been very, very cautious about breaking people. So there are a lot of things out there in the cloud providers where you may not know this, but if you're using a certain type of load balancer and a certain type of health check, it's actually not health checking your service very well. But there's a better way you can do it, but you have to know that option's there. We've got a whole bunch of these little hidden, I don't know, nuggets of better behavior that we've added over the years where we need to start making those breaking changes and saying to people, look, the old behavior doesn't work for you. Here's a bunch of stuff you didn't know that will improve your service. Let's flip those defaults. I don't know what that is for.
No idea.
I hope no one's
You know
bugged
what
by
the
it.
very exciting thing is? This is someone's, wow, it's like a timer. Should we try pressing buttons on it?
Yay.
Yay.
All right. If this keeps beeping, I'm tossing it into the crowd and somebody else gets to debug this one.
Well, I
You
mean,
want to give that to somebody? All right. That is very exciting. I assume that was to help us stay on time, but we're not late. We have another whole 15 minutes, so it's fine. So we did start talking about the tech debt, the cleanup. Walter, I think you had a few things that you wanted to clarify about. We did this whole out-of-tree migration. We're not done. Like, what do we have left to do?
yeah. So Joel reminded me of another tech debt, but I'll get to that after the question. So there are a lot of things that were difficult to clean up and were not part of functional Kubernetes. So the example several of you may have heard me quote is, if you want to test whether or not a kubelet can successfully recover from a network outage, you need to restart the network service. And the way you do that is not the same on any cloud provider. So every cloud provider that wants to run this test, the test itself has cloud provider specific code in it. And so when we were removing code, we handed it to the various other SIGs, because we're mean, and said, hey guys, either you fix this or we'll work out how to deal with it later. And so all that testing's gone because no one wanted to fix it. And so it's later, and it's time that we actually had an answer. And one of our thoughts is, okay, we now own a lot of cloud provider repos. Cloud provider GCP, that several people have harassed me about in this conference alone. Cloud provider AWS, cloud provider Azure, cloud provider Huawei, and I'm sure there are other panel members who've been harassed on their cloud provider repo, but they're not actually their cloud provider's repo. All those repos belong to this SIG. And the only way I think we get those tests working again is we make a reference implementation that can be deployed from every one of those SIGs for that cloud provider, and then we run all of those tests that got yanked out of tree into the appropriate place so that we can actually start getting that test coverage again.
And if this sounds like we're saying in tree, out of tree, in tree, out of tree, I mean, yeah, hello. You never get something perfect the nth time, but the nth plus one. All right, that it's going to be better. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better. I think that, Joel, you had some thoughts about the testing in terms of where we're at now. And we talked a little bit about, yeah, it's been many years, but now that we're fully into the subject of testing, what do you think we need to do?
Have some. So one of the issues we have with a lot of the tech debt and the problems that I've been solving over the last few years is that the only testing we really have is me deploying a cluster and saying, yep, this is better, guys, I promise. Because we don't actually have any test suite for the cloud provider functionality. Every single platform has their own way to deploy a load balancer, and that's an important part of any kube cluster, right? Those load balancers serve all the ingress. If we make changes there and we break the existing use cases, we have no idea right now. And so the load balancer improvement I want to make, I have no confidence in it right now. I know it works on OpenShift. I know we forced it on every platform we run on OpenShift. But believe it or not, most kube clusters are not OpenShift. So I'm talking about like a 1% sample size here. We need to do more testing and make sure that we are confident this is not going to break the other 99%.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And I'm, of course, looking at Jesse, because why not? And thinking, how can Crow help here?
So I think back to like, working on lower level in the system when I wrote drivers and we had test fixtures. And the test fixtures abstract. So if you have a driver for a disk pack or you have a driver for a network card, you still had a test fixture. And I think Crow can help build those test fixtures. I think one of the great ways that the community has already started building with this is saying, I'm on, 2 different clouds, or I'm on-prem and in a cloud, and I have one single RGD that under the covers using simple cell expressions does one thing or the other. And I think those test fixtures following that pattern could be a pretty powerful primitive to add into the mix. I believe that what we have in the project right now could be used to do that, but we have some things coming in the near future that would make it even more powerful around mutation and version control. So I think that that's a place where Crow also makes a lot of sense coming in as a sub-project, because I think this is going to be one of the places that you see it in public view used to make, kind of move the project forward and to help you sleep at night. So.
And I would add to, I mean, I actually think that's sort of a primitive that we build on top of. If you've looked at like SIG apps has a bunch of ML recipes, but once the ML recipes go beyond the very simple, and excuse my Google myopia, you need to start doing a bunch of G Cloud commands to set up the load balancers and the service accounts and all of the other things needed to get those recipes, which are really great recipes, up and running. And we know that we've demonstrated in the SIG that you can use Crow and ACK-ASO KCC to get rid of all of those cloud provider specific things and have a very simple RGD that will create the appropriate load balancers and service accounts to make that recipe a one simple CR boot up.
And maybe it's important to remember that we have 5 people from vendors sitting here, but the vast majority of people who are trying to get something done with this kind of tooling don't work at a vendor, and they don't particularly want to try to solve something 3 or 5 or n different ways. And I think that's one of the real big strengths of the Kubernetes community, is bringing together, all of these companies to put some muscle behind making sure it's easier for the end users to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, which I can assume that nobody has a goal of, I want to spend a lot of time with CRDs this week. Like, that's nobody's goal, right? So, and you had some thoughts, I think, as well, Almiko, about this specific area, the test improvements and where they will get us.
Yeah, no, I mean, just following along with what, everyone's saying here, like, I am excited by the work that is happening now to kind of build the foundation for these tests. And what I mean by that is that, in order for us to get to a point where we could have a generic set of tests or a kind of universal set of tests, and we can say, I'm going to run these on AWS, I'm going to run them on Azure, I'm going to run them on Google, I'm going to run them on Huawei Cloud, whatever it is, right? Like, to get to that point, there's some foundational work we need to do in Kubernetes. And I went to go see a talk, I don't know if they're in here, but Justin Santa Barbara from Google and Cyprian Hackman from Microsoft, they gave a great talk kind of talking about where they're going with COPS and some of the features they want to bring into COPS. And I think it was really cool to hear them talking about bringing Cluster API into that mix, because in my mind, once you get Cluster API in the mix, you kind of unlock the potential of about 24 different clouds that you could start testing on. And to me, that's going to be the juice that brings this all together, so that we can have this testing infrastructure that's able to call out to all these different providers to create the code for that. And then in my mind, where that goes next is exactly back to the conversations you're having, where maybe I'm talking with a customer who says, Mike, I'm trying to build a sovereign cloud so that I can make sure that my data boundaries are kept and my AI workloads are not getting into these other places. How could I do that and know that all my Kubernetes and everything is working the way I expect it to? And if we can show them using Crow to automate some of those underlayers where they talk to their own internal cloud. And then we say, here's how you bring the testing in on top of it. And yes, this is the same test that we run on all the other clouds. Like, to me, this is, I think it's exciting times,
Oh, I was not. No, I was just nodding. That was exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, like, again, big shout outs to all the works that's happening in COPS, and, and I want to see, now I'm kind of inspired walking away from this KubeCon thinking like, okay, yeah, how do we get there? It seems like there's a real path to achieving this, and yeah, it's cool.
All right, but we've been doing a lot of talking, and I want to hear what Bridget thinks is exciting and up and coming for the cloud.
All right. So I think we are at our wrap up moment, and I think we do get to all have something that we're excited about. And I guess I'll start and say, I think that Miku and I, maybe a year and a half ago, I remember having a kind of discouraging moment where a new contributor wanted to participate in SIG Cloud Provider and came along and was asking us, where are your good first issues? Where do we get started? And I thought, oh boy, this is a tough hill to climb, because you need to have access to cloud resources that we're not providing for you. You need to have a certain amount of understanding of all of those we talked about, ASO, ACK, ECK, et cetera. Like, the amount of foundational required knowledge to get started to be useful in SIG Cloud Provider was a pretty high bar, which felt bad to not be as welcoming as we wanted to new contributors. And now that we're opening things up and building better primitives so that new contributors can just come in and start working with Crow right away, and in that way be useful in SIG Cloud Provider, but not have to know absolutely every in and out of a cloud, is, I think, a really powerful thing. It makes me really glad that we're able to be more welcoming to new participants in this SIG than we were able to be in the past, which, is a goal, of course, for any SIG chairs. You don't want your SIG to be the hard one that no one can come to. So I'm pretty excited about that. Right? How about you, Jesse?
I'm excited that Crow has found a home where I think we can have real meaningful impact in the way that we first envisioned. When Walter, Bridget, and I should just take a moment to say, the Crow team is much larger than just people here. We have Amin and Barney, Justin as well. Nick Slattery, who is just like spirit animal for a while. Is he here? Hey, I think I just wanted to give that shout out. We have about, I think, 71 contributors at this point who are all individual, actual human beings. Very fantastic. So I'm mostly excited that we found a place that's, we're not trying to be flashy with it. We want to make a primitive that just works. And I think we found a way. There's a use case here that it's really going to work. And I think it's going to be sort of a blueprint for how it can solve a lot of other problems. And fundamentally, I'm just happy to be able to contribute to this SIG in particular, because it's really important and it's at a transition period. So personally, I'm excited about that.
So I've been thinking about lots of different things. The testing thing is very exciting. I really want to see the testing done. But I'm also really interested to see how the Crow and KRM stuff affects the wider environment, right? Like, there's so much repetition of I need to call EC2 or G-Cloud or whatever. What if that all was just done through Kube APIs and through the different implementations that are going to be behind Crow? Maybe that's where we'll be in 5 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, I share some of Bridget's excitement, especially with the idea of being able to get more contributors in, right? And so in my mind, one of the endpoints of where this testing initiative takes us to is, I can see a future where a new contributor comes to SIG Cloud Provider and says, I want to get involved. And we've got a testing infrastructure where they can put a change into any cloud provider that the SIG owns, and they can see it automatically tested for them. They can add the test to go with it. And, that really builds confidence. And I'm really inspired by the work of the cluster API community in this respect. And, big shout out to Fabrizio Pendini and Stefan Berenger, if you're out there watching in the ether webs, hello. And, because that community has done a really good job of building this kind of structure where providers can come, they can exercise the common test to make sure that what they're doing works, and they've got a really great roadmap for the future, and everyone knows how to follow and move along. So that, I want to see more contributors in SIG Cloud Provider too.
So I'll take it in an odd direction. Everyone says AI, so obligatory AI, ML, agent, yeah. Joking aside, though, that's really starting to matter a lot, and Kubernetes needs to move fast, right? I mean, I think more than anything, the lesson right now is everything is different every week, and the only way to deal with that is to move fast. And a day or two ago, I was in the Spotify, had a great talk, and warms my heart and the heart of the rest of the panel here. They had traditionally used the Kubernetes tools to write controllers to write their control plane. And they said it would take about 30 days using the traditional tools to build a new CR. In fact, there they are. There's our Spotify folks. But they said it takes us like 30 days to write one resource with the corresponding controllers, and it's expensive and it's painful. And then we tried KCC and Crow, and I'm going to claim that it's Crow, and K-pop. And we went from 30 days down to 1. And so what excites me is that we need that kind of acceleration, and I think we can help bring that kind of acceleration, right? And it doesn't, I mean, yes, we may need to bring it because of ML, but we don't always have to bring it with ML. And I think, we definitely see that with Crow.
Wonderful. All right. Well, that's our time. Thank you all for being here, and we will be happy to take questions as people come up and want to chat with us. All right. Thanks.